So I was up in the middle of the night, as I normally am when we bring our little one into bed. If he's sick, he's tossing around, he does a little tornado shit. And I'll look at my clock, and if it's like after 3 o'clock, usually I get up. I tell my wife I'm going to work, but usually what I do is go into the fridge, look for some watered down iced coffee from the day before. I don't want to brew a new one because that would wake everybody up. And I shuffle into my office and I watch YouTube brain rot for a couple of hours. And my justification for this is that when it is time to start my workday, I've gotten the brain rot out of the way so I can just go. Well, this time I stumbled onto a video from Man Carrying Thing. Seen a couple videos, funny guy, seems to be insightful, and he was responding to The Critical Drinker, who made a video a few years ago about masculinity in movies under the not so subtle tagline of "They hate men."
On January 13th, 2023, the popular review channel The Critical Drinker posted a video called Why Modern Movies Suck - They Hate Men Part 1.
He posits that the central male heroic archetype that we know and love so well has been killed off, and that men have been largely replaced with doofus stand-ins from creators who are on the radical side of a certain political ideology. It's kind of the same clips from the same movies, you know, where it's obvious girl power here, obvious guy getting kicked in the balls here. And at this point, we know who took over like tech and video games and movies and TV shows over the last like 10 years. And it's not really a secret what they're really about. But I didn't really give it a second thought, and that's why I was interested to see this response video to kind of challenge my point of view a little bit, see what I'm missing. So we're going to cover that. Now, the big problem here is that there are just so many goddamn movies. So it's like anybody can make a case about anything and then find something to substantiate it. I mean, it's like with sports. Somebody can make an assertion that some trend exists based on their intuition, their experience, but there really is just too much data for the average person to either like validate or rebut what the person is saying. And that's why listening to sports fans argue is an exercise in losing brain cells. But it also makes me wonder why I don't also get to use the lived experience line. It's like everybody else gets to take it on vibes when they smell that something is off. They're largely taking it face value, but here we are getting gaslit after a decade of getting the most on-the-nose activist brain slop from multi-billion-dollar corporations that have hired the most antisocial, unhinged personality disorders on the face of the planet to run their most major IPs. It's like, yeah, we're not being unfair to the men. I don't know what you're talking about, buddy. I would expect the people that are pushing back against a critical drinker to just go mask off and say, yes, we're pushing back against the damaging cis male heteronormative archetypes that have come before, because that's like literally our mission statement. I don't know about you, but we want to be on the right side of history. So I do find it kind of odd every time somebody wants to like diminish your complaints without acknowledging that this is literally what a lot of the people that are making content want to do. Whether or not they're right is a different discussion. I'm just acknowledging that there has been a shift in the air.
Men, don't you just hate them all? Well, if you happen to be a creative working in Hollywood today, then the answer is probably yeah.
Yes, his voice does sound like that the entire time. And I realized what my true interest was in this video, and that's how it's a bad video. It has really bad editing. It's bad. And just by trying to explain why this is poorly made, I can also explain what so many people get wrong about modern masculinity. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to argue that the critical drinker doesn't understand men.
The Man Carrying Thing starts out by poking fun at the critical drinkers' videos. He chides his editing style, he calls his videos bad, and he takes a dig at his over-the-top accent, which is a little weird because that is a character and that's why he got as popular as he is. So he's like, yeah, he always talks like that. And it's like, yeah, I know, that's why he has a couple million subs. But it is completely fair play. I get my panties in a bunch every time some oversensitive turd screams ad hominem at the slightest sign of smoke from a solid burn. Roasting is entertaining and it's a useful, valid part of an op-ed, in my opinion. It only becomes ad hominem if you're actually committing the fallacy of using that to base your argument. So we don't tolerate snowflakes around here. The Critical Drinkers videos, as you all have seen, they are completely low effort videos, randomized clips of like the most famous videos that are vaguely referencing what he's talking about. And I'm actually envious. I looked for a while to see if there was some random movie clip generator where you could just plug it in, because it hits the threshold of being just relevant enough to not be disorienting and moving fast enough to keep you engaged so you can get the meat and potatoes of the presentation, which is the written essay, without you actually having to put work into creating the visuals. I mean, every video essayist on YouTube follows the same formula. It's 5 parts of obsessing over, drafting, redrafting a carefully thought out and concise essay where you're dumping all of your brilliant wisdom onto the page, and then one part of just kind of manically trying to find whatever B-roll you can that doesn't get you kicked off YouTube for their AI violation. But I was unsuccessful in finding such an app that would give me randomized clips, so now you have to look at my face. Yeah, look at it.
Hard as it may be to believe now, there was a time when we were practically spoiled for choice when it came to cool, awesome, aspirational male heroes on the big and the small screen.
Iron Man, Superman, Batman, Deadpool? Deadpool came out in 2016. Is the nostalgic time we're looking back to so recent? Have we degraded men so much since then?
They were a whole generation of men who kicked ass, triumphed against the odds and saved the day, and usually looked pretty cool doing it.
Wait, hold on. Sure, older generations of men kicked ass, of course, but does that include my generation? Because I saw Interstellar in theaters in 2014 and The Force Awakens in 2015. If you really think about it, I'm like a soldier who stormed the beaches of Normandy.
So MCT's over here, he spent a little bit too much time, I think, on superficial quips where he's kind of like freeze framing the clips in the video and saying, well, they don't quite line up with his point. And there were a couple funny ones in there, but I thought that detracted from his main point. Like where he points out that like Deadpool was too recent. I thought that was kind of strange because yeah, the first Deadpool was, what, 2016? I think most people see like the really crazy woke wave coming in like 2015, 2016. Twitter is where it really took off, and it went full bore all the way up probably through COVID, and then it's been tapering off over the last couple of years. So I don't think of movies as being created in like 2014 or 2007 as being part of this wave.
All right, so you're probably noticing a pattern by this point. The drinker's words don't match up with the movies he shows on screen, like at all. I'm pretty confident that he or an editor compiled a bunch of clips from IMDb's top 250 movies back in 2016, and he's been using the same hard drive file since then. No shame in that. I mean, I'm lazy as hell too, but the problem is that he lets his arguments get undermined constantly by the images he shows on screen. And that's like... this is my favorite part about this. It's not just a couple times. The whole video is like that. It just keeps happening over and over again, so that if you have any understanding of the history of movies or Hollywood in general, the video cancels itself out. It neutralizes itself. And I don't blame people for not necessarily noticing, because the images move so fast, they go rapid fire through your cornea that, you know, it's effective in shutting your brain off.
The traditional heroic male lead that was pretty much the bedrock foundation of cinema for almost 100 years is apparently no longer a viable commodity in entertainment today.
Montgomery Clift, Richard Burton, Paul Newman, Marlon Brando. I mean, you got cool shots of guys being guys, yeah, but these are not examples of the heroic male lead that he's talking about. These are method actors of the 50s and 60s. Like Montgomery Clift, he was known for his complex, troubled characters. He was gay. Marlon Brando, I mean, these guys broke the mold of acting in general. So to our eyes today, yeah, they look like manly men when you show a second of their performances. But for their time period, they were dangerous, sexual screen presences, deeply psychological, and very, very emotional. If I was making the critical drinker's argument, I wouldn't, but if I did, I'd show clips of, I don't know, Gregory Peck or John Wayne. More the type of actors who fit into this traditional model, heroic model he's talking about.
Now, he does catch the critical drinker pretty well on here when he points out that the clips from movies that he didn't watch that just kind of generically show somebody looking masculine were actually from method actors from the mid-century that actually challenged the paradigm of the male archetype back in their day. We look back on it and be like, yeah, those are men's men, but without being too offensive to my gay brothers and sisters, method actors in the 1950s, probably not less fruity than they are today. Just a guess. And a lot of these guys were portraying masculine roles in ways that were taken seriously, but not in like the stoic way that he's suggesting. I still kind of side with the drinker because whatever claim about the stoic hero he's making is kind of small. I actually don't think he should have based his video on that. I think that's part of a broader problem, which is the general treatment of male characters in any movie. It doesn't have to be a hero. It could be a drama. It could be a rom-com. And if you look throughout the history of movies, all the Academy Awards that have been given out, how the types of movies have evolved over the years, the representation of men has changed across all of those genres. And I don't just mean that like our idea of what being a man has changed. It's the treatment of the men in the story by the people that are writing the story. I mean, you can have a silly musical comedy where the main character is dressed in a ridiculous tuxedo and tap dancing, but where that character is still treated with some amount of respect or treated as being basically competent or not just simply a buffoon there to elevate everybody else in the movie. So I think he would have had a much better thesis if he just said that men aren't being treated the way they used to be. It's largely negative, and it's usually for nefarious purposes, or if not, it's at least the result of some bias that has kind of permeated into the industry. So broadly, if I'm going to put a movie on one side or the other, if I'm going to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, I'm generally looking to see if the movie treated the men as being either generally positive or generally competent. You can look at crime movies that are masculine. There might not be a redeemable soul in there, so it's not positive, but they're all competent men. Or you can look at something like Forrest Gump. Certainly not extremely competent, but shown in a very positive light. Now, of course, there is absolutely a time and a place for storytelling that doesn't arbitrarily elevate men to being something fucking special. But that's kind of the point. We're not talking about case-by-case scenarios that are tailored exactly to the genre. We're talking about the zeitgeist, a much bigger pop culture where movies are bigger budget, they have to appeal to more people. What are the biggest movies that reach the biggest audiences tend to have featured in them? I don't think you can really make a case that there isn't a difference.
They're too dated, too toxic, too dangerous to put into the limelight, and so they've been replaced with more acceptable alternatives.
What is this image? Like, in 2023, when this video came out, Timothée Chalamet had already played Paul Atreides. Robert Pattinson was Batman. I mean, whatever you think about these actors, these are iconic, dare I say, masculine roles. Pattinson as Batman is intimidating and stoic. Everything he says that he wants. These three guys, they're just like skinny, well-dressed men. Does he hate fashion? And Lakeith Stanfield, like, what is... He's not even in like any big movies. What did he do?
This was a funny picture. This made me laugh. I mean, it's a prototypical, like, these are drama kids in Hollywood. What do you expect? Drama kids aren't historically known for being hyper-masculine as it is. I didn't think too hard about this. This was just another loose reference to what he was talking about. You have these high cheekbone, skinny, waifish, stylized metrosexual men. I mean, the same type of environment that selects for these types of movies and these types of writers, it's going to select for these types of men. And I think it's always been like that. To MCT's point, Hollywood is filled with leftist drama kids who just aren't likely to be dripping with masculinity or even feel good about it if they were. And some of our favorite male performances are from people that fit this bill. Tom Cruise is small and hyperactive and over the top. By all accounts, he's fucking crazy, but goddammit, he is like the last great American action hero. Robert Downey Jr. is one of my favorite actors of all time. The Iron Man to this day is like my favorite superhero movie as far as depth of character, the arc he goes through, how serious it took the subject matter, how well the movie was put together. But he's another like kind of effeminate, like high fashion Hollywood weirdo. They're all weirdos, guys. I mean, you can replace Timothée Chalamet with late 90s Leonardo DiCaprio, but that's still the guy that gave us like The Departed and The Revenant. So I think the actors aren't a huge point here. And there's also the big over-muscled actors. There's the Dave Bautistas and the Rocks and the John Cenas, even though they're not as ubiquitous as like Schwarzenegger was in the 80s and 90s. I really think this is just more about the people that are making the stories, that have the agendas, and how that influences the themes and the treatment of the characters they have in it. And it's not even that like the men are suffering. I'm not a representation matters type of guy. I think it's just a smoking gun of the ideologies that people writing the movies are beholden to. And I think it's part of a bigger problem, which is people writing movies who are generally very self-centered. They're in their own era at the moment. It's me, me, me. People that aren't really grounded in what you might consider like old world traditional values. These are people that kind of invent their new values according to the modern landscape. Oftentimes they're not really based on anything, or they're just going along with kind of the social vibes at the time, which means those values can and do change pretty aggressively. Or worst case scenario, you're up against a value that works against you, so you do the postmodernist thing and just kind of deconstruct it, because what the fuck are values anyways? And I think these are people that have maybe a well-meaning but rather unproductive view of how we should handle things like identity and prejudice in our society. And by overcorrecting, they end up doing a lot of shit that I think causes more harm than good. And the worst sin of all, I mean the absolute worst fucking sin of all, it makes bad movies.
Fuck it, go turn on your TV and watch basically any commercial break that comes up in the next hour or so. Tell me, how many dumb, hapless, incompetent husbands, fathers and boyfriends do you see constantly screwing up even the most simple household tasks and needing someone more diverse to bail them out? Go ahead.
So here Drinker points to the very old doofy dad trope that's been around for a long time. I mean, they've been making dads the goofy punchlines in sitcoms for like half a century. Now I'm on both sides on this one because I do think the trope has been taken too far. I mean, the character assassination of Homer Simpson from early seasons to later seasons is absolutely legendary. Everything from Everybody Loves Raymond to King of Queens. I mean, Home Improvement was about a successful man with 3 kids who had a TV show about his expertise, which was home improvement stuff. And the entire running joke was that everything he touched, he destroyed or lit on fire. It at times gets to a point where you don't wonder if the people writing this actually are just children of divorce, which is extremely likely today, and they have a less than positive view of their dad who maybe wasn't there enough, or maybe he was kind of a loser. I fully understand loser men are a thing, but I want to be very careful of the oversensitivity that often pops up with these types of arguments. I've heard this a bit with certain black figures that are sensitive to the trope of putting a black man in a dress. Cat Williams went on this rant, and he painted it as some deviant obsession that Hollywood moguls have with demasculinizing black men. And from my vantage point, people do this because it's hilarious and it's wildly successful. And we've seen this with Tootsie, we've seen it with Bosom Buddies, we've seen it with Mrs. Doubtfire. I mean, some of the most beloved comedy bits in history have been this kind of easy, low-hanging fruit of seeing what happens when you take a man and try to make him fit into a feminine role. It is a recipe for comedy because it is the height of juxtaposition. And it seems to me that when you apply that to black culture, where the men are often expected to be a lot more masculine, they represent themselves as more masculine, but then the women have much more like clearly defined roles and modes of expression, you're just heightening the contrast between the two, and it's funny. I mean, the portrayal of Shanae in the Martin TV show.
What do you want, Shanae?
Oh my goodness. If it isn't Little Miss Attitude.
Is different than the portrayal of Big Mama's House or Medea, and that's different than White Chicks. I'm sorry, black men pretending to be white women is fucking funny. I don't care who you are. And we all generally look at these in a comedic light without thinking that they're some degenerate expression of demasculinization. And for that reason, I don't hate the dumb dad thing because it's often funny and relatable, and in a comedy, that comedy should take precedent. Now, you need a litmus test for when it goes too far. Besides, well, I feel like this went too far. I generally look to how they treat the subject. Is the dad ever allowed to be the good guy? Is he ever looked at with love or reverence by his family? Does he care? Is he present? And aside from that, how much do they spread it around? Do they ever take the wife off of her high horse? Do they knock her out of that ivory tower? The king of dumb dad sitcoms is Everybody Loves Raymond.
Just forget it, Ray, okay? I'm fine.
Jelly donut?
Yes.
But even if Raymond is the biggest idiot in the world, Deborah doesn't become less unlikable because of how much time she spends berating him, and the show really doesn't avoid knocking her off her perch whenever it gets the opportunity.
I don't know, man. I think you just don't like commercials. The thing about commercials is that they're trying to, sell something, and they exaggerate things to make it look like their product can fix your whole life. Wow, this dad is a fucking idiot. Look, he just broke some shit. What an embarrassing father figure. Frankly, I don't see him as an aspirational male hero. And now he's just gonna let this gorilla beat up his family? What a frickin' moron. He probably needs some gorilla glue. The thing is, there's plenty of ads with guys being cool loners with strong jaws. That's because these types of ads are trying to appeal to a vision of who you want to be. There's lots of different types of ads. I just love the tonal whiplash of being like, men used to be badass like Paul Newman and Marlon Brando. Now they're gay and dumb like these guys in a Doritos ad.
No, I did laugh at this because it is a seemingly off comparison. Cultural icons of the day versus commercials, like the lowest of content. But we're talking about the zeitgeist. We're talking about trends as a whole, specifically the things that get viewed by the widest array of people. And I don't think there's an argument to be made that these tropes haven't just become like the default setting. MCT here also sidesteps kind of an important line. And I don't know if he just wanted to avoid the third rail, avoid getting his little finger zapped there by touching something that was a little spicy. But the trigger mentioned specifically that it's not enough to have the dumb guy. The dumb guy usually has to get set straight by somebody more diverse. Could be a woman, could be a gay man. If it's a gay black woman, that's like 10 out of 10. Let's try an experiment. Just close your eyes. I want you to imagine you're watching a Doritos commercial, and it starts out with a couch in a living room. There's a bowl of Doritos, and sitting at the couch is your most favorite generic white guy, the serious-ish actor. Maybe it's a Matt Damon, maybe it's a Tom Hardy, who the fuck knows. All of a sudden, Wanda Sykes walks in. Do you have a sense of how this dialogue is about to go off? Of course you do, because this setting represents a type. It's been done before. It's a template, because the people that write these things are hyper-aware. In fact, they fixate on the identities of the people. Their ideology mandates that you look at it through historical power structures, and that means that things are going to flow one way. So I don't think we're out of pocket for recognizing it, given that it is the literal express mission of the people that are making this content. It's not just that the male character is treated as doofy, it's that it's not in service of the comedy, it's not in service of an interesting story, it's in service of elevating the other person who has an identity that we deem needs to be elevated. So it's this type of weird patronizing thing where the character can't really be anything more than a placeholder for your entire worldview about disparities. Like, I remember when the term token was a bad thing, but now it's like expected that you have tokens. It's a problem if there isn't somebody who's just there as a placeholder because representation matters and all that. But I wonder at what point it's going to come back full circle, where once again you look at the kind of old-timey racist trope of the magical black angel figure, and then again start to see that as being something that's kind of offensive and patronizing, because now you can't have people do real things and behave in real ways.
To give shape to his video, he breaks the issue down into 3 tropes. Trope number 1 is
the death of the stoic man,
in which he explains at length how, super cool guys used to be in movies.
Think about the subtle shifts of power and dominance as their scenes progress. The use of pauses and facial expressions and eye contact.
The guys did used to be cooler in movies, in my opinion. I love old movies like Captain America Winter Soldier.
A stoic character is one that's generally reserved and emotionally distant, the kind of person who bears their troubles and discomforts without too much complaining.
So he compares the cool masculinity from back then to the fragile masculinity of today.
The men in movies and TV shows now tend to come across as annoyingly talkative and expressive, reacting emotionally to what other people say and do, instead of coolly observant and keeping their own feelings in check.
For whatever reason, he's contrasting Tom Cruise and Clint Eastwood in their best roles to Ewan McGregor playing the bad guy in Birds of Prey. And this is the first clip he lets play for a long time. Like, he really hates this performance. I haven't even seen this movie, but it just seems like typical bad guy behavior, right? I've seen many a comically over-the-top villain, and this seems like that. It's kind of like going, man, food used to look so good in old movies. Now Hollywood makes it look disgusting in The Whale.
Now the drinker right here, he's a victim of his own B-roll. As MCT says, yes, this is a trope that's been done before. The villain that's like over the top and gaudy and really emotive. But if he's relating characters of today against some stoic ideal of the past, we have to consider, like, okay, what is he actually talking about? Death of the stoic figure. Well, the stoic figure is somebody that doesn't speak a lot, doesn't respond in a lot of emotional ways. He's like a heat-seeking missile. He's got his task, his thing he needs to do. His motivation is usually kind of one-dimensional, boils down to like vengeance or revenge or getting even. And it's often just a pretty tight story of him going after it, meeting an obstacle, overcoming the obstacle, going after it again until the finale where he inevitably kills the bad guy. Now I can look back through the last 10 years of films to see if we have any stoic characters. Indeed we do. We've got Mission Impossible, John Wick. It's like the king of modern stoic characters. Oppenheimer represented some stoic male characters, even though it's a biography. But Dune, the Batman, the Northman. You remember the fucking Northman? That shit slapped. Top Gun, the Green Knight was solid. Tenet. Chris Nolan got up his own ass a little bit, but you can't say that they weren't stoic male heroes in that movie. So while he used Ewan McGregor in that scene, I think he was calling to the more normal kind of blockbuster portrayal of a male hero, which is going to involve a lot more comedic relief. There has to be a platform for like as much fucking meta humor as possible. Essentially, all of the MCU movies started shifting this way. You have Spider-Man, you have Guardians of the Galaxy, Jurassic Park, so you got a Chris Pratt twofer, the Avengers movies, Captain Marvel, and on and on. So I think the movies he's talking about that challenge this stoic archetype are the ones today in the biggest franchises that are supposed to reach the greatest number of people, because the hardline stoic male archetype doesn't sell as well to a broad audience as Ryan Reynolds making a bunch of meta dick jokes. And this actually creates a problem because it's kind of hard to define when you're in problematic territory, because he shows Deadpool as an example of like a better male character, I guess, even though it is like Ryan Reynolds turned up to fucking 15. I see the Ryan Reynolds and the Chris Pratts as both highly entertaining comedic actors who are in fun action movies, but also people that absolutely fit his definition of like the talkative, emotive, expressive, neurotic type of men. And then I think about my favorite 90s movies, and so many of them were like comedy action movies, buddy cop movies, Rush Hour and Lethal Weapon, Bad Boys, where if stoicism popped up, it was specifically to make fun of it. I can look at the heroes they've put in over the last 10 years, which seems to have shifted more towards kind of goofy and neurotic and not really self-assured. I mean, it's like if you took all the losers from 90s rom-coms or teenage coming-of-age stories and then made them superheroes. It's like a generation of Jason Biggs in costume. I mean, Jesus, I don't think I was even in high school yet before I realized the absolute disservice that all of the writers born in the 60s and 70s did to me as they proceeded to write the most bullshit, self-absorbed, poor me, nonsense rom-coms where they self-inserted themselves as the dorky, outcast, awkward, it's not fair, the jock gets a girl, I'm pretty good too. Where they kind of normalize that like obsessive, stalkery, nice guy bullshit where the prettiest girl in the school likes you because obviously you've got a heart of gold, not because you actually had to do something difficult like get out of your fucking shell and learn how to socialize with other people. And we're seeing the exact same type of influence now. But thanks to the internet, we're just better at calling it out in real time. So I think the drinker would have been much better off narrowing the problem down by saying that it's not just the death of stoicism. I think that's actually a weak case because there are stoic examples that persist, especially as you niche down away from the biggest movies. I think he would have had a much better time selling this point if he was more focused on the general trope that's pretty well established that has to meet two criteria. One, men are debased, not taken seriously. They're there to be doofuses or to be ridiculed or to be the punchline of some meta gag. Because of point two, the writer's desire to elevate some other character that has a particular identity that the writers decided ahead of time has to be elevated. Like it might seem obvious to look at the groups of people that were running Twitter and making video games and writing comic books and TV and movies in 2016 and think, yeah, they're probably not huge fans of the men. Now, the thing is, I don't want to lose dumb men as a punchline. As a staunch manonist, I think men are overflowing with positive traits that should be celebrated and recognized. And one of the most positive aspects is that we're dumb as fuck and we're self-aware about it. I mean, this trait of men is like my favorite weapon against all self-serious feminists and ideologues who missed the most important lesson in second grade, which is the first person to care fucking loses. Men can often behave in ridiculous and over-the-top ways, and we're aware of it, we own it, we enjoy it, we make jokes about it. I mean, I could go to sleep and wake up in a world where women are unequivocally smarter, more capable, more conscientious, and fuck it, let's just say stronger. Let's say I wake up tomorrow and I'm not the only person in my relationship that's able to put gas in the car. But as long as we can crack jokes about making sandwiches while lighting our farts on fire, while the women sit there with their fists on their hips, that impossibly tight little straight line from their pursed lips just maulding over it, we win. Every time. This reminds me a lot of like rough and tumble play, which is a really important developmental element with kids. It's no different than wolf cubs who are like attacking dad and kind of play fighting with each other. It is how you practice aggression. It is how you learn to read people in social situations. And it's pretty well established in the field of psychology and the behavioral sciences that when a child misses out on this stage, they are left very vulnerable socially because they are less likely to accurately interpret threatening instances, and they are more likely to overreact to non-threatening instances. Well, say one thing about men, say that we like to get drunk and wrestle in the backyard while loudly insulting each other based on their most crippling insecurities. And that perception of play violence, it shapes how we interpret everything. It's the same with roast comedy. People that get upset at edgy humor because they think it's being offensive, they're the same people that would walk into a dojo and see two guys sparring and say, well, they're hitting each other, they should stop it. Roast comedy isn't edgy for the sake of it. It's the recognition that comedy serves a vital role in taking our most traumatic events, our biggest insecurities, and instead of letting them destroy us and have power over us, we do as our friends across the pond say, and take the piss out of it. In the throes of devastation, of sickness, of war and famine, and crack a joke is uniquely cathartic. And to be able to push back against the oppressive forces of society when it's infected everybody and created a hive mind that's gotten too big for its britches. Whether you're cracking a joke at the self-serious pilgrim school marm or the self-serious pilgrim sociology professor, that's to give you a powerful weapon that curbs the growth of movements and ideologies that typically gain momentum faster than the people influenced by it can rein it in. Now, when mob rule is taken over and all the women are clucking their heads yes like a bunch of hens, it's typically the women in those social settings that are very bad at saying no and sticking their neck out by getting on a soapbox and being like, this has gone too far. Fellas, if you ever get the opportunity, I strongly recommend you eavesdrop on 4 or more women discussing politics, especially when you know at least some of them disagree with each other. I mean, watching them navigate that conversation without hurting anybody's feelings or saying anything that'll get them kicked out of the group is exactly like watching the Squid Game bit where they were crossing the bridge trying to avoid falling through the panes of glass. Now, with men who spar and poke and prod and understand it's not the end of the fucking world, if you disagree with the group, you are just more likely to get at least one asshole in the group to stand up and be like, I don't think that's quite right. In fact, there's a non-zero chance that that guy's going to drive his point home by mocking the leader of the group by repeating his lines back to him in a Happy Gilmore voice. And that type of aggressive dissent can only come from a species that takes itself less seriously on the whole, and I think that's worth preserving.
What happened? He complains some more about modern guys not being able to handle protracted silence by showing us clips of Ant-Man and Thor Ragnarok. It's weird how all of the cool stoic guys are in crime thrillers like Heat, but all the dumb guys are in superhero comedies. Clearly there's some conspiracy at hand. And I'm not even arguing that ideas of masculinity haven't shifted in the past 30 years. They obviously have, whether you like it or not. I'm just saying this is a bad way to present it. If you're going to compare masculinity in a crime thriller of the 90s to an equivalent genre of today, be my guest. But I'm guessing he doesn't do that because there are plenty of great modern thrillers with stoic men in them.
Now, MCT is right about this. Across genre, I honestly don't think there is much change, but again, we're talking about the whole. We're talking about what most people tend to see, and no doubt popular genres have shifted pretty heavily. And Drinker and his followers are mainly fans of sci-fi and fantasy topics, especially comic book properties, and it's just unfortunate for a lot of them that Disney owns like all of that now. So what we have are the biggest genres, the biggest franchises in the world that get overwhelmingly the biggest number of views are being given this kind of modern treatment. I don't know, maybe you're watching the gritty Vince Vaughn movies that he's put out in the last 10 years, like Brawl at Cell Block 99 or Dragged Across Concrete, both of which I highly recommend watching, but these are in fact much lesser known movies that hardly anybody has really seen. But if you're along for all of the Marvel phases, you really get whiplash from the way they treated characters before and the way they treat them now. Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, Thor, they all went through carefully crafted story arcs where the characters were treated seriously. They were flawed and that was part of the story, but they were heroes and they were given a hero's story. As you slide into phase 4 and you witness the regular ball kicking, you witness the women that regularly get the most bizarre moral mulligans, and the women that just kind of end up overpowered while sacrificing like the least amount possible, it's obvious the differences. Again, this isn't about if everything's changed, and it's not even about if it's right or wrong. I mean, that can be its own different essay. But at the very least, you can't look at the tonal shift across these properties that have collected more views than like any other franchise in the entirety of moviedom and say that there isn't something different in the air. We're not just talking about how masculinity has changed. We're not talking about feelings or men being able to be more in tune with their emotions. We're quite literally talking about men being the punchline specifically to elevate other groups that the writers foundationally believe should be nothing but sage, wise, and infallible in these properties because representation matters.
All right, so now the critical drinker in a really stunning reveal. He just puts all his cards on the table. This whole time he's been kind of pretending to analyze what's wrong with Hollywood, but now he wants to tell us what's wrong with how the world sees men.
The reality is that most of the time, men just don't feel things as deeply as people seem to imagine. They don't tend to get hung up on things in the same way that other people do. They don't constantly fret and worry over trivial problems.
Men don't feel things as deeply as people seem to imagine. I have to laugh because it feels very depressing. It's not even like the main message of his video. It's just something he says. Like, I feel like even super hard right anti-feminist guys would disagree with this. But hold on to that because I'll get back to this.
Now this bit is going to be a bit controversial. I'm probably going to lose a lot of charity from some of you here, but I'm going to stick with my guns anyways. I think the drinker is mostly right here. Now let me save you the fire alarm going off from your fat fingers smoking across a keyboard and melting the plastic. Men do feel things. They should feel things. Being able to correctly identify and handle those themes is a problem for men, and the process of being able to do that is part of coming of age, it's part of maturing as a man, it's part of becoming more productive, more stable, more healthy, and that's why that arc has been at the center of some of the best masculine pieces of all time. Even though the drinker's talking about stoic men, I count any movie that handles that topic seriously and in good faith one of the good ones. But we're talking relativity here. Men don't feel things as deeply as other people being women. Do men feel? Yes. Do men feel the way women feel? Not even fucking kind of. Again, save your keyboard. Some men do, some women don't. We're talking about generalities over a population. So remember, back to high school math, what a distribution curve is. If you take height for men and height for women, notice that there's overlap. Some women are taller than men, but most men are taller than most women. The fact that the curves are distinctly shifted is enough to say these groups have a tendency towards one or the other. And this is known in psychological circles. Men often suffer from emotional colorblindness, which is we interpret every experience through the feeling of anger. If you've ever heard a man try to break down what he's feeling, it's like, oh, your girlfriend broke up with you. How do you feel? Oh, I'm pissed. Oh, your truck broke down. How do you feel? Oh, I'm pissed. Canadian Mitch Hooper beat 9 Americans at the Arnold. How do you feel? Oh, I'm pissed. Funnily enough, we also suffer from actual color blindness. Now, some of you are going to be losing your shit because you took a few sociology classes and uncritically accepted every truth statement they made about other fields that are not sociology. We have fields of psychology, biology, behavioral sciences, been studying this shit for a very long time. Blank slate, it's not a real thing. We do have innate predispositions. It's like the way old Microsoft PCs used to come with Minesweeper on it. My dog didn't have to learn how to hump things. It's just built in there. Now, if you do believe that, I'm not going to call you an idiot, but your idea is an idiot. Just consider the use of hormones. That's part of what they call gender affirming care. So if you're trans, if you're born as a man, and you are trying to make the migration over to representing as a female, you take hormones. Well, it turns out the hormones have a pretty substantial effect on your cognition. Men who experience high estrogen levels are just more likely to cry at a fucking Downy commercial, where women that take testosterone are more likely to have a really high libido and be aggressive as fuck, because that's literally what those hormones do. I compete in strength sports, and anabolic steroids are just part of the scene. They're fucking everywhere. I've known many a woman that's taken testosterone. Any of you women that have ever said some dumb shit like, we're just as horny as men, go find a female to male trans friend or go find a female bodybuilder. Tell them that shit to their face. They're going to say, have you ever taken testosterone? You're going to say no. And they're going to tell you to shut the fuck up. Men in the field also experience it. Yes, I've experienced it, because when you cycle off, your testosterone levels drop. Your estrogen levels for a period of time stay through the roof. And if you don't manage them properly, which the meatheads in this field almost never do, you turn into a big, muscly, doughy, whiny, sweaty fuck. There's never been a woman who has dated a bodybuilder or powerlifter who has not uttered the words, "you're such a fucking woman" right now when they're coming off cycle. Now also understand, I don't just stick to this way of looking at the world when it's convenient for me. I'm fucking consistent. Notice I'm not trying to weasel out of the fact that between 90 and 96% of the people in prison are fucking men. We're 14 times more likely to be incarcerated. That's not because the system is oppressive against men. It's because in the pool of all men, there's just a lot more violent motherfuckers. Now we all get along day to day because the average man is only a little more aggressive than the average woman, but small differences about the mean result in huge differences at the tail end of the bell curve. And that's also why if you ever meet a woman who's been in prison, you treat her like she is a galaxy level fucking threat. Think of the 10% of men that are in prison. Well, it's that 1% that's going to be off their fucking rocker that you want with a mask on their face strapped to a gurney like Hannibal Lecter. That's how much you have to deviate from the norm as a woman to get to prison. I don't care how cute she is, fellas, you fucking run. They're all Lorena Bobbitt. It's just a matter of time before you find out. So with respect to the main theme here, which is men being stoic in movies, that comes from the men who historically have had to do the hardest shit that required stoicism. Notice that throughout the first decades of the Academy Awards, the biggest movies were war movies, and that would extend all the way up through recent history. Well, a platoon of men fighting for their lives when there's really high stakes, turns out they're probably going to be some pretty stoic motherfuckers. Part of it's predisposition, part of it's some of their experiences. As a trend, you get men being more focused, more task-oriented. They tend to take conflict in stride. If you take issue with that, ask yourself how many times a man has cried after getting punched in the face. Then ask yourself how many times a woman hasn't. Go work in a female-dominated space. I worked in restaurants for years. That shit was like 3-to-1 women to men. And I've never once seen a man cry because a customer was rude to him. And the women, that shit was going on every week. I'm sorry, I'm getting angry and hostile. It's not your stupid questions, it's the man in me. Now again, there's gonna be men and women that are outliers on either side. And as a trend, I'm sure you could get more men to open up if you really pushed it. And you could probably get more women to be more stoic and closed off if they were conditioned to do so deliberately. But the default setting, the minesweeper that came with Windows 98, they are indeed different, and that is what has dictated the flavors of all crime, war, suspense, and romance movies throughout the history of cinema. Now, none of this means that you can't have depth to the story, like vengeance, pettiness, insecurity, ambition, guilt, all the feelings, all the motivations that drive a man to do anything. Any realistic portrayal of these experiences for a man is likely going to involve a heavy monochromatic dose of the feeling of anger. And showing how that gets expressed, whether it's turned outward, whether it's turned in, having them pick it apart, having them work through it, having that relate to the sequence of events, is actually how you make good cinema, and that's also how you make something that is actually relatable to the male audience. And if our privileged asses were spending time critiquing movies, that's like our biggest cultural concern, if we can look at the state of things and say that there is a problem, that's probably one of the bigger ones. It is that a hyper-feminized, overtly leftist, justice and equity-minded group that is making cinema is going to do a really, really shitty job of telling the stories of a really big chunk of the population. Again, this isn't just about the men not being okay because they're not treating us well. It is foundationally just about good fucking storytelling.
In trope number 2,
The deconstructed hero.
the drinker complains about his favorite movie heroes coming back in legacy sequels just to appear cynical and jaded. Of course, he mentions The Last Jedi, Creed, Star Trek, Picard. You don't have to like The Last Jedi or what they did with Luke's character, but it is like a classic trope. It's just a way to bring in these legacy characters and give them an arc. It can be done well and it can be done poorly. What's weirder, though, in this segment are the other two franchises that he complains about.
Or how about Superman? Surely one of the most long-standing examples of the strong, square-jawed, patriotic male superhero. Well, not in the mind of Zack Snyder, who transformed him into a sullen, brooding, conflicted outsider who doesn't even know if he can or should help humanity in any way.
Zack Snyder's Superman fits the perfect definition of a stoic male hero, but the critical drinker probably just doesn't like that movie for some reason, and he's like, no, that's actually a bad example. He wasn't being stoic in the right way. Even people who defend Man of Steel, I won't, think Cavill is playing a reserved, stoic Superman.
All right, now this one's going to piss me off because this deserves its own video essay, and I might even make it after this if my gears are still grinding off the rails. Zack Snyder's Superman is not a stoic male hero. He is brooding, but so is Todd from The Wedding Crashers. Superman is the axiomatic hero. What makes him stand out is that he is an unyielding beacon of virtue because he is so foundationally grounded in principle. He's like the last hero we have that's not constantly neck deep in this mire of moral gray, trying to figure out, oh, I did this, but I'm guilty. Should I have done the other thing? Superman is to his core, by definition, virtue with the red fucking cape. I talked about the assault on men in movies as being more about good movies, but it's also important to note that it's also not isolated to men. There are downstream effects of this type of treatment. Our worldview is at the same me chirp that repeats in the heads of millennial and Gen Z writers. In general, male stories tend to involve sacrifice, taking care of other people. Even if we don't do that, that's the thing that we would like to be. And the problem is that Masculinity Deconstructed requires a lot of these pillars of a healthy and pro-social and conscientious society to just outright be fucking demolished, which makes you wonder what is propping us up anyways. See, Superman was the alien. He landed in the American Midwest, raised by salt of the earth people with simple grandfatherly values. So where you have these like kind of simple Christian inspired ethics from average Midwestern farm workers who would be biased to doing the hard work that has to be done because you have to on the farm or else you're not going to survive. And they'd also bias to doing the right thing because it's the right thing, because that's a temple of Christian ethics. Instead, Zack Snyder took Clark Kent's biggest influences and role models, the people that would mold him, And they took Ma and Pa Kent and fucking neutered them. They turned Ma Kent into the devouring mother. When Clark was conflicted, what did she say to him? You don't owe these people a damn thing. She's so attached to her precious baby boy that the scope of his power, the scope of the threat in the world, the scope of his obligation to humanity was lost on her. It might as well not have fucking existed. That's her little boy and other people want something from him and she's just not gonna have it. These are small-minded virtues. In fact, you could say it's not a virtue at all. And what do you expect the virtue to be of somebody that was raised with that influence? Now, in a vacuum, this is great for creating conflict in the character. No doubt conflict arose, but it's absolute shit for raising the man of unyielding principle, of unwavering sense of duty to humanity that would not only inspire the world, but for many it would be their first exposure to good versus evil. Again, this goes beyond the stoic man. It's masculinity and the usefulness to society, the virtue that it's supposed to encompass, that's being debased sometimes as a function of bad writing, like with Zack Snyder, people that just don't know how to do anything else, and sometimes from people with dyed hair, daddy issues, too many credits in the sociology department that have a very clear bias that's going to bleed out into every story they ever tell.
There's another example of this with the Ghostbusters 2016, which I'm surprised it took him this long to mention. It actually shows a lot of restraint.
The intended humour here was to contrast his physical attractiveness with his complete lack of brains and common sense, in effect making him a male bimbo, surely one of the most tired of all movie cliches. But again, it's apparently fine to portray men this way because, as we all know, men are dumb and that's funny.
Not to defend Ghostbusters 2016, but I think a big part of the joke is that it's stunt casting, you know, like they got Chris Hemsworth. Like he is serving a different comedic role than Janine was in the original. I'm not saying it works necessarily, but I don't think it's representative of Hollywood hating men. It's just, what if we got Chris Hemsworth for this part and he was a total moron? I mean, that's kind of funny.
Now, I stand by Chris Hemsworth in this role. I mean, taking the hyper jacked, good looking dude and making him dumb in relation to a bunch of like smart but mid looking females, that's funny. I'm sorry, that's funny. I'm not gonna say the movie was funny, but the premise is funny. And also, as a mid male, I don't have special attachment to males that get paid for their looks, all right? The brotherhood of men only goes so far. Making pretty people dumb, I support that all day. And this critique of the drinker goes back to what I said earlier, that the biggest risk is taking yourself too seriously. Like, if you don't die the hero, you live long enough to become the feminist villain. I thought that this was a shitty example. There were so many other examples you could have pointed to that would have driven the point home a lot more. I mean, by the time this video came out, we already had Rey Mary suing all over Star Wars. Jennifer Walters had already informed Bruce Banner that he has nothing to be angry over. Thor had already been one-upped by Jane in Love and Thunder. Wanda had already gotten a moral hall pass for enslaving a town of people. Loki had already been outdone by his female self. Shang-Chi had already had to deal with Katie, and both of them had been kicked in the balls. So yes, this is particular to like the superhero and sci-fi fantasy genre. However, these are quite literally some of the biggest and most influential franchises in history. So yes, if you look to smaller productions, you look across genres, you're going to find a preservation of these archetypes, but MCT over here even concedes that they're not made quite as often because the entire machine is pushing towards either more blockbusters that make $1 billion or things that cost nothing to make. So no matter how you slice it, the landscape has indeed shifted. And even so, he tries to say, well, you got to reach the teenage girls and the housewives. Nothing about these franchises is actually oriented to them. It's not like this messaging is required to get your mom to go see the next Thor movie. So while I'll agree that the typical stoic archetype from decades past that doesn't pop up quite as much anymore is not going to do the same numbers as characters that are more conducive to comedic relief. I would also say that the extremes, what we're really complaining about, the frequent ball kicking, the girl bossing, the passing off of mantles arbitrarily to characters we don't give a fuck about, the bait and switch, the general debasement of men, I don't think has anything to do with the broad audience. I think it is a function specifically of the type of people that run the movies, that produce them, but more importantly, that write them. I just saw The Bride this weekend, and there's no doubt in my mind that everybody who's been a part of the writing team of a Marvel movie for the last 10 years holds that up as a modern day classic and wishes that they could write activism that nuanced. I mean, shit, take 28 years later. I was so excited to see that movie because it was a great horror movie. The first one's a classic. I actually like the second one. I know a lot of people don't, but GFY. So you have this acclaimed horror series that's being revived, and I'm like, this looks freaking fantastic. I was all in for the first half hour of the movie because you have the apocalypse, you have these people that are clinging onto life on an island. They rebuilt civilization in its primordial form from scratch. They're going back to the old ways. And because of their ability to form social cohesion and the traditions that they built, they were able to survive when the entire world was ending. The movie starts out, Aaron Taylor Johnson is a father taking his son on this rite of passage, something dangerous, something risky, something that establishes you as a man, somebody who's capable and can take care of other people and be useful, the qualities you need in this little civilization if you want it to continue surviving. And when he's successful and he comes back and the father trumps him up, he even embellishes while he's telling the story of his kills, and he's drinking and there's a celebration. And what do the filmmakers do? They go out of their way to get you to relate that unreliable storytelling to the type of exaggerated mythos that I guess English nationalists cling to. They immediately remove the father from the movie as they have the child redo the coming of age. He's got to go through the real one, which occurs with his mother. So they establish that the bond with his father, it's based off false pretense, so it's phony. The father is lowered, the mother is elevated. Don't worry about who or what is actually keeping the community alive in the face of the apocalypse. It defies reason, and it defies the standards you would hold if it was literally any other type of community that wasn't English. So in the face of this debasement, you have to recognize that the type of people that write these stories, if the world did go down, these are the people that would be fighting you tooth, claw, and nail as you tried to rebuild anything out of the ashes.
He's appealing to nostalgia, not just to say movies used to be better, but to say that men don't feel as much as people think they do. On the left and the right, I see constantly the sentiment that men want community. Men feel just as much as women, and you know, men want to express that in genuine, healthy ways. To me, it's not really a political debate, you know. I think the patriarchy, cultural norms, limit men and women and limit the ways we're allowed to express ourselves. The drinker's prescription here that men just need to bury it down and that we want to see men on screen doing that too is useless. It's retrograde. This doesn't help anybody. It makes me think if this is what he thinks about men, then I don't care what he thinks Hollywood should do about it.
I don't know if it's fair to say that men bury it down. There's just a recognition that the portrayals of men have been largely feminized. When you look at the number of female writers that call themselves feminist, again, I don't know how that becomes controversial. And it's not in this type of progressive way that imagines men softening up a bit is like good for them. It's in a way that is really combative. It doesn't exist for the benefit of men. I would argue even for the society as a whole. It very often comes off feeling like a gut punch that's supposed to make up for some past offenses the creator of the story endured. I don't think anybody would look at First Blood and not think of that as an adequately masculine movie, but it deals heavily with the emotional fallout of the Vietnam War, with the guilt, the isolation, the PTSD. These are big feelings, and it addressed it in a way that no movie really had. So do you call John Rambo the stoic hero? Do you look at the subject matter and say that actually it's a deconstruction of that because it dealt with the emotions underneath? Again, I don't think it fucking matters because it was a good faith, honest, masculine representation of a masculine issue. And that's all we're fucking asking for. Of course, there's plenty of room to move things forward, but movies aren't really doing that because one, the people making them aren't qualified, and two, they could give a shit less anyways. So I have plenty of good faith to give MCT over here. I generally enjoy his commentary on things. I think he's underselling who's making these movies and how monolithic their worldview is in those spaces. So that was a lot. That's all I've got to say about that. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. Let me know what you think below. Tell me what you agreed with. Tell me where you think I was wrong, and I'll meet you in the comments to argue about it. Thanks so much for watching. Till next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.